right, I'm going to go ahead and get started, and because I want to make sure that we use our time well, and that you guys get an opportunity not only to that I not only have an opportunity to get through the content, but that you have an opportunity to ask questions. And what I would say is during the session, any questions that you have, just put them into chat, and we'll kind of be monitoring that, and I'll either answer them along the way or at the end. But first, let me say thank you so much for joining the session. Welcome. I am Kjirsten Mickesh, CEO and co-founder of Connect Human and maker of Connection Zoo. I'll let you read my bio for details. I won't spend time on that. What I will share with you about me is that this session brings a blend of my many years of human resources experience, as well as my experience as a startup founder. So I hope that you will not only take away some insights, but some practical tactical things that you can do as well. So the first thing I would love to have you do is put into chat any challenges, or actually questions as well, any challenges or questions that you have with respect to your people or culture. I'll give you guys a moment to type in the chat, and I'll kind of keep going, but I do want to make sure that I'm collecting some of those things along the way so that I can make sure that we're talking about it. You see, adapting right now during COVID and continuing our great culture. That is awesome. I will get to that in a few minutes, so thank you for that. And again, let's see what else we have. Increasing diversity of our staff. Yep, we're going to talk about that. So that's already a part of this. Yes, above. Okay, awesome. Feel free to keep adding things in the chat, and I'll keep monitoring it. But so far, the things that you've mentioned, I will be talking about. So let me start with this. And that is that if there's nothing else you take away from this, and I hope you take away more, that is that you need to treat your culture and people strategies as business strategies, not as something separate. And when you do that, and when you're intentional about your culture and your people strategies, and you have, and I'm using quotes, the right culture and people in place, the impact it can have on your business is pretty profound. And I'll talk about what I mean by the right culture and people in just a few moments. But when you put intentional focus on culture and people, it will first and foremost help everyone stay focused on what's most important and operate in a way that is most aligned with who you are and what you need to accomplish. And there's a ton of research that talks about the business impact of intentional culture and people strategies, particularly when they are aligned with the business strategies. And it's what we know is that you'll see 15% greater employee productivity. You'll see up to 20% less absenteeism, quite a bit of less turnover, and greater customer satisfaction levels. Now, as a startup founder, the other thing that's going to be incredibly important, maybe at this stage, maybe in future stages, is funding. And potentially you'll go to investors. And one of the things that is at the top of most investors' lists is a great team. They want to know who's on your team. And so, again, another reason to be very intentional. So as you think about the components or the core building blocks for an integrated culture and people strategy, I will call out 6 of them, 3 that are related to culture and 3 that are related to people. And so when you think about the foundation, it is about intentionally defining your culture and investing in your people. Now, I talk about, you see in the headline there, integrated culture and people strategy. And what I mean by integrated is that it is a part of the fabric of your business. It's an integral part of your business strategy, not an add-on or something off to the side. A big thing to remember about culture is whether you intentionally define it or not, you have a culture. it will define itself if you don't do that intentionally. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit in a minute, because right now, whether you have taken the time to do that, I could ask you all to tell me about your culture. We could ask the people that work with you or for you to define your culture. They will all be able to do that. Now, whether or not that's what you want is a different story. Could be a different story. With respect to people, it's not just enough to invite people to join your team. You want to be very thoughtful about who you invite, and then you need to invest in them. And you're going to hear from me more than once talk about that when we're talking about people, whether that's the people that you're currently working with or those that you might want to invite, you need to think about those relationships as relational, not transactional. And so again, talk about that a little bit in a moment. Let me quickly walk through each of these 6 steps, and then we're going to dive a little deeper on culture and a little deeper on people, and then talk about the to-dos. So when we define culture, three key components or building blocks. The first is purpose and mission. And so asking yourself, why do we exist? What do we do? Have we clearly defined our purpose and our mission? Do we articulate that? Do people know it? Do people inside the company know it? Do people outside the company know it? The second building block is values. And so based on why we exist and what we're trying to accomplish, what is most important to us? What do we stand for? And those are your values. And so each one of these things builds on the other. So once you have clarity around purpose and mission, you can then define those values. The third component is policies, procedures, practices, and principles, or the 4 Ps. And this is all about how do we operate? And are we operating in alignment with our mission and values? So it's not enough to just declare a mission and declare your values and put them on your website or hang them on a wall. You've got to pay attention to how you're operating. And that's the place where it often goes wrong, is many companies will define their purpose, mission, and values. They may even define the policies and procedures, but how you actually operate doesn't always match. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. When we think about investing in people, 3 core building blocks. The first is collective expertise and skills. So where to start with that is understanding, again, based on why we exist as a company and what we need to deliver to whoever we serve. What are the expertise and skills that we need for all of the essential activities that ensure that that's what we do, that's what we can accomplish. And then being able to kind of take inventory. What do we have? What do we need? Now, one of the things that I observe and hear from founders so often is that they're doing everything. And there's lots of reasons that they might be doing everything. It might be control. It might be we don't have the money to pay others to do it. There's lots of reasons for that. However, as a founder, and this is true for every person in your organization, you all have your sweet spots. You all have those skills and expertise. You all have the things that you love to do, that if you are spending more time on those things, you're going to be bringing more value to the organization. So understanding how you can play to your strengths and where you might need to let go as a part of kind of taking that inventory is really important. Talent acquisition, next building block, and that's all about how you acquire the talent you need. And so once you know what you need in terms of expertise and skills, you need to decide, are we going to build, buy, or borrow? Or do we have people inside the company that we can develop to now have that expertise and skills that we're missing? Do we need to buy it? And that could be hiring employees or contracting or using freelancers, or do we borrow it? One of the things that I've experienced that I love about the startup community is kind of the bartering system that exists or can exist. And so you might borrow some skills and expertise for someone else and lend them some of your own. The other part of talent acquisition is finding the people that can complement and kind of complete your inventory of expertise. And so really looking at the strength and the diversity of your network. Again, we'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment. And then finally, your employment value proposition. So being very clear about, again, being intentional about this and being able to articulate, why do people want to work for us? Not why do you think they want to, but why actually do they? And so anybody that you are working with or is working for you, ask them. And then part of that employment value proposition is your mission, your vision, and your values. That's an extension of who you are. Providing meaningful work. Onboarding is about getting people off to a fast start and making sure that they know how they can be successful and that they feel like they belong. Developing them along the way and recognizing them for their contributions. And then those last two there, strong team and great culture. Everyone wants to work for a company with a strong team and great culture. So as we look at culture a little bit deeper, the best definition that I have ever seen about culture is the way we do things around here. And culture is learned and it's shared and it's often out of sight and conscious awareness. Let me give you an example of culture that I love. Think about how you eat dinner, right? So how we eat is very cultural. And if you invited me to your home for dinner, I would come in and you would likely carry on the way you normally do for dinner. I don't know what those rules are. And so unless you explicitly tell me, obviously I can observe, but my ability to know how to do dinner with you is going to be a little bit slower because I'm trying to pick up on cues and so on. So do we sit at the table? Do I serve myself or am I served? Do we have certain places that we all need to sit? Do we say a prayer or have some kind of ritual before dinner, right? It's how we do things around here. And the same thing applies inside your company. So we need to be sure that we're declaring our culture, we're teaching it, we're making it known, and we're living it. So as you look at the left side of this slide, you'll see one of my favorite graphics, the iceberg, right? There's the things above the waterline and the things below the waterline. And the things above the waterline are the way that those things that are pretty obvious and that we talk about or maybe post on the wall, put on our website, that say, here's who we are and how we do things, right? And it tells us a lot about our culture. There is as much or more that is beneath the waterline that we often aren't paying attention to, that will shape our culture as much or more as those things above the waterline. And I think, as I look back at my experience in the companies I've worked with and for, probably the biggest thing that goes wrong with culture is that what we say our culture is not what people experience. And that is not a good thing. So the other thing we want to keep in mind with culture is it really needs to be, again, back to those building blocks, an extension of who you are, why you exist, and what you're trying to accomplish as a business. Let me give you an example. I'll give you two examples. So one, my startup, it's my son and I. And one of our values and one of the things that is kind of hallmark in terms of the way we operate is real talk. And part of that is who we are as people. We are direct, we are candid, we're open. And so that's an extension of who we are as people. As well, our business and specifically our Connection Zoo brand is built on connecting through conversation and conversation about things like emotions and feelings that are often tough, right? So that real talk is a very important part of who we are as people and what we stand for as a company. Another example, company that I worked for, we had a strategic imperative around innovation. So really, really important to the company and what we needed to achieve. However, what was built into the DNA of the culture was don't make mistakes, failure, not good. In fact, there was folklore, there were stories around a team that most of the team members were fired because of a failed new product launch. And so that folklore was stronger than the, hey, let's be innovative, it's okay to fail. And we're like, no, it's not okay to fail, because other things told us that was the case. And the name of the game at this company was flawless execution. So if you think about that, that's probably not the kind of culture that you would intentionally create to be highly innovative, right? So the other thing that I will mention about culture as well, with respect to it being an authentic extension of who you are and what you do, is let's say you want to, what's really important to you is that all employees or all the folks that you work with have a voice, and that if they see a better way of doing things, that they get to do it in that better way. That may be great for your business. And maybe you don't put a lot of rules around that. Or if you're in business, like a medical device manufacturer or a medical device company where safety is paramount, you might say, hey, we want you to have a voice. We want you to tell us when there's ways to do things better. However, we've got a very clear procedure around how that happens so that we never, ever compromise the safety of the people that we serve. So those are some ways to think about how you do culture as an extension to who you are. Now I want to talk to that COVID, the COVID challenge that was mentioned in chat. So if you, one of the things also about culture that we need to do is always keep our eye on the culture. And when the market shifts, when the world shifts, when our business shifts, we need to intentionally shift our culture. And but we want to look at what are the things that are non-negotiable in that culture. And so now that we're doing maybe 100% remote, certainly more remote, those non-negotiables about our culture, we want to make sure that we're reminding people these are non-negotiable parts of our culture. What we may have to do, though, is shift the behaviors around those aspects of our culture. So when you define your culture, it's not enough to say, here's what it is. It's what are all the behaviors that define or that demonstrate and bring to life this culture. So when we're doing things remote, let's say you had, let's say you had a culture of not a lot of scheduled meetings, and instead you tried to do as much kind of real time, bump into each other in the hallway or grab each other and do a quick conversation as needed when needed. Let's say that was part of your culture. Now you're not with each other. Looking at whether it's technology like Slack or other kind of collaboration tools, or thinking about how you use text, whether it's technology or other ways, how do you continue that part of your culture, but do it in a way that can be as effective in a remote perspective. The other thing is, and I've been saying the word intentional a lot, we have to not only continue to be maybe more intentional in the COVID environment, but also more kind of literal and explicit. So some of the things that we might be able to pick up by observing each other's behaviors and by being with each other, we may have to say out loud. And so that's another way to make sure that we're kind of adapting. But again, really think about what are those non-negotiables. We will not change these, but we may have to change the way we do them or the way we live them. And what might be some new cultural elements that you need to adapt, that like hours that you work, for example, in this COVID environment. Okay. So 5 steps, and I've really kind of touched on these to defining and creating your culture. Starts with purpose and mission. Also, then your values that come out of that purpose and mission, but those are not enough. You've really got to look at the way you operate, policies, procedures, practices, and principles. And those practices, how are you actually behaving? No matter what's written down, how are you behaving? And those things, again, you need to pay attention to those. You need to systematize it or codify it in your culture. So again, looking at what behaviors are we or should we be reinforcing that align with our values and adherence to any of the policies and procedures we have in place, and how are we holding people accountable for that? And then finally, on a regular basis, evaluating and evolving your culture. What I like to do here is say every 6 months or every year, whatever you want it to be, put it on your calendar. We're going to take an hour or 2 hours, and we're going to look at what we've said our culture is, and we're going to do a very real, very candid evaluation of, is that what it is? And what's working, what's not, what's serving us well in terms of our business and also our experience as employees, and what's not serving us well. What has shifted in the world or within the business, and how will we evolve in order to make sure that we're still relevant and still able to do what we need to do. Okay. So let me ask you this, and I'd love to see some points in chat as well. What does great talent look like to you? How do you know when you meet somebody with great talent, or how do you know when someone is right for your company? And again, I talked about the word right before. When we're thinking about culture, your culture is right for you if it's an extension of who you are as a founder and as a company and what you're trying to accomplish. Same goes for talent, is you need to be inviting people in who complement and kind of complete your vision and the expertise that you need to accomplish that. So as we think about, and again, 5 steps to hiring great talent, first and foremost is being very, very clear on what do we have, what do we need. And again, as a founder, really taking an honest look at yourself to say, what am I doing that no one else can do, or no one else can do as well as me, that brings me joy and adds tremendous value to the organization? And what could someone else do better? Or what could someone else do as well, maybe differently, but as well, that would free me up to do more of the stuff that I do really well? And then determining if you're going to build, buy, or borrow. So doing that up front is really important. And again, making this a regular practice. From a networking perspective, and I have another slide on networking in just a moment, it's about casting a wide net. You have to network. And I know probably more people than not that do not like networking and or don't know how to do it. And that's a whole nother workshop, and happy to share more on that if any of you are interested. But it's absolutely critical. It's a good place to start is with the people that are currently in your network, but don't limit yourself to who's currently in your network. LinkedIn is going to be one of your best resources for finding great people or great talent, or people that can connect you with great talent. There's also an opportunity to network and create partnerships with organizations and educational institutions that can be an incredible pipeline of talent for you. And there, when we talk about networking, it's relational, not transactional. And I'll tell you a little bit more on that in just a moment. From a hiring process perspective, you do not need to over-engineer it, but think about what kind of a process you want to put in place in terms of being able to efficiently and effectively bring talent into your organization. Understanding your biases is really, really important. And when you think about biases, it's preferences. It's your preference for something. It's what you favor or have an inclination towards. So that's really what biases are. And ultimately, what our biases do is keep us comfortable. And comfort is not necessarily what you need or what's going to bring you the kind of people that you need. So getting very, very clear on your biases, because as soon as you're aware of those biases, you can make sure that they don't get in the way of hiring really great people. So when you think about interviewing and selecting people, have at least one other person who's going to have a different perspective, a different way of seeing things, to kind of help you keep your biases in check, and also help you do a more thorough evaluation. Job descriptions, really important. Again, you do not need to over-engineer this. You do not need to have really formal job descriptions, but you're going to want to have enough of a description to be able to convey, either verbally and or through a posting, that this is what we're looking for and these are the qualifications. And it is really important to be able to differentiate between required and preferred qualifications. Everyone you interview needs to have most of those, or all of the required qualifications, but they're not going to have all your preferred, right? And so being clear on that is very helpful. And then having standard interview questions. When you talk about, back to the question around diversity in the recruiting process, starting again with networking, that's going to be the first place that you're going to want to start. And again, I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. Understanding your biases is number 2. And then representation, the more diversity, and that can be any way you want to define diversity, but the more diverse the people on your interview and selection teams are, the better opportunity you'll have for not some of your biases or blind spots getting in the way. Job descriptions that are clearly defined and standard interview questions. Ultimately, with the hiring process, you want to make sure that the candidate experience is exceptional. This is the first impression that people have, and it's a total reflection of what people are going to experience when they get inside. We talked about employment value proposition, so being clear on that, and then being sure that you're living up to it. So with networking, some key questions, really looking at your network. How diverse is it? How actively do you manage it? And how are you using LinkedIn? I will invite you to connect with me on LinkedIn. I have a really big and very diverse network in every way of diversity. And of course, if you connect with me, then my network is now your second connections. And so as you find people that you can connect with, that's the starting point, is to start to broaden and diversify your network. As you think about this from the perspective of tapping into this incredible talent pool that is out there, here are some resources. Again, if you go back up to the top of the chat, my email address is in there. If you want this list of resources and then also a quick culture audit and people audit, send me an email and I will send this to you and you can get all these links. But there are some incredible resources out there that you can tap into. The Opportunity Partners is a really great organization that employs people with different abilities, and they do a whole range of activities from warehousing, fulfillment, etc. So they're great to tap into for people with different abilities. The comprehensive list of organizations there is an incredible list of diversity organizations, really great national sources for recruiting. Twin Cities Professionals of Color, you can connect with them on their Facebook page. And then as you're thinking about contractor freelance resources, Bus Stop Mamas, if you haven't heard about it, is awesome. And then I'm guessing you've heard of Upwork and Fiverr, and there's some others as well. But these are great ways as you start to partner with some of these organizations. Again, relational, not transactional. It can really help you build your pipeline. So I won't walk through these takeaways, but ultimately, again, you've got to regard your people and culture strategies as business strategies. Make sure that they're an extension of who you are and what you're trying to accomplish. And that will go a long way to helping you build the kind of business that will be competitively advantaged and able to grow. So with that, I thank you, and I'll ask if there's any questions, anything else that I could provide to you before we conclude the session. And you can either put it in chat or you can request to join with audio and video, and either way is fine. Oh, thank you, Dave. Appreciate that. All right. And again, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Would love to have you as part of my network, and check out our websites and send me an email if you would like any of this content. Thank you, Laura. All right. Take care, everyone.